Well, we have a theory of everything. All of the knowledge that we have will be related by a unified worldview. And that has many interesting consequences, benefits, really. And it also becomes very easy to identify. My name is Zachary. I'm interested in a philosophy of art, and I want to understand how a unified worldview will change how we appreciate art. This is all sparked by this book, The Fabric of Reality, written by David Deutsch. Amazing book. And in the first chapter, he talks about the unified theory of everything. This is what he's talking about with the whole book. It's the fabric of reality. David thinks that we already have enough knowledge to have a truly unified theory of everything. He's bringing together Everettian quantum mechanics, Popperian epistemology, Turing's universal computation, and Dawkins' neo-Darwinian evolution. And with these four things together, they make a comprehensive worldview. And this comprehensive worldview that comprises of everything that is already understood. And so with this theory of everything, if we ever update our understanding of anything, then it should shed light onto all other subjects. That's kind of that. Well, that's one of the first things that I want to talk about in terms of what happens when you have a unified worldview. That will be one of the things. All new knowledge means that everything that you understand gets updated. In the simplest way of putting it, if you understand something new, that sheds light onto the unified worldview, and updating your unified worldview would affect your understanding of literally everything else. Right. So a simple, silly way of putting it, like if I learned how to cook my eggs better, I'm just experimenting with cooking eggs, it should change how I drive because in our normal world, in our way of understanding the world, cooking eggs deals with physics. So having a new understanding of how to cook eggs will change my understanding of physics. And having a different understanding of physics will change how I drive. Now, of course, it's a bit of a heavy-handed and it's a silly example, deliberately so. But you can see the structure of what I'm talking about here. In a more serious sense here, if we update our understanding of the nature of knowledge creation in evolution, that should change our understanding of epistemology, which is just knowledge creation broadly, which will inform how we relate to people. So we have different ideas of how knowledge is created that might change how we want to relate to people. So having a change in our understanding of evolution might change how we relate to people. Or if we have an update in our understanding of what we think is, if we have an update in our understanding of physics, that will change our understanding of what is computable and what could be computable. That could radically change how we interact with technology and how we create technology. So you see the structure, you see what I'm getting at here. Any change in our deepest knowledge should affect our understanding of literally everything if we have a theory that applies to everyone. And just that should just apply. When I say everything, I mean everything, right? That should apply to our relationships, that should apply to our understanding of ethical behavior, that should apply to our understanding of art appreciation, which is what I'm interested in. And this comes with a very, very nice benefit that if we do come to some new understanding that shows up in many different areas of our life, the moment that there is an error, then those errors would be more obvious because they become more widespread. If I have a false notion of physics and I base a lot of my life on physics, like the way that I drive or the way that I cook or the way that I relate to people, when I start seeing those errors in those areas, then I could pinpoint that the error comes from my understanding of physics. So whenever you update your worldview, if you see a bunch of errors, then you know that the way that you updated it is incorrect. So that's a pretty nice benefit there, and might push you to mm, correct your errors much more rapidly. If we think about the opposite worldview for a moment, like a fragmented worldview, whatever that may be, then the way that you do one thing in one area, some set of fields, have no effect on anything else in any area. So you might get errors someplace and have those errors be entrenched, and since they never pervade outwards, which I guess would be good that they're contained, but there's never a prompting to update them, or there's fewer prompts to update them. And so the speed at which somebody might begin to update all of their errors would be much slower because things are siloed off. Someone might not notice the mistakes in their health if they do not think that those mistakes will show up in other parts of their life. Another thing to note here about the unified worldview is that smaller and smaller observations will lead to even more radical changes in our worldview. It's kind of a big part of the um, a big part of the unified worldview is that updates will be pretty radical, and updates will be driven by more and more smaller observations. The smaller might not be precisely the right term, because they do end up being smaller sometimes, but more subtle maybe is the right way to put it. They're going to be more subtle observations that show that we have errors in the way that we're understanding certain things. So those smaller, more subtle observations are going to be the things that lead to major changes in our worldview. So this opens us up to greater clarity, greater precision with our understanding of the world, and uh, that's just another one of the benefits to understand the world more precisely. And in that precise understanding, we get more frequent radical shifts in our understanding. So a lot of this is relevant and interesting to me. And I think a lot of this would also be relevant and interesting to other people because, of course, they would want to understand and update their worldview based because it would affect the things that they care about. But this leads to this understanding that anybody's pursuit of knowledge in anything that they do could lead to a understanding that changes the entirety of whatever worldview you have, which would also affect the understanding of the thing that you are personally interested in. So, to the extent that you have a more fragmented worldview, you would be interested in things you'd be interested in only your subject of interest, right? I mean, it just kind of makes sense and adds up there. But you would not care about what anybody else. Uh, you would not care about what knowledge anybody else is creating in their interests because it's not directly related to your interest in a fragmented sense. But the more that you have a unified worldview, meaning that you believe that there is a theory of everything that applies to all knowledge that is known by humanity or by some group of people, then any pursuit, any interests, any person's interests, any person's creation of new knowledge will affect the unified worldview, which would mean that you would care about anybody creating new knowledge in any field about anything because all of that would have an effect on the area of interest that you have. I hope that made sense. I think it did. So this is more of an encouragement of um, independent research or having people have their own individual interests. Whereas in the more fragmented worldview, you might get this tendency for people to dismiss or discourage other people to um, freely explore their own interests. You might get this sort of authoritarian attitude. You must learn physics. You must learn mathematics. You must learn, I don't know, about the climate and so on. You have to learn politics is the most important thing. Uh, the more fragmented your worldview is, the more siloed off certain fields are. And so you can have this sort of hierarchy of things that are most important and less important. But the more unified your worldview, then every development of knowledge will equally serve every other development of knowledge. And so there's no need to have any hierarchy at all. Oh God, the worst thing would be trying to force yourself to do something that you deem is important, right? If you get into a position where you think that certain things are more important, so you can't allow your attention to drift to whatever it naturally drifts towards. Jesus, we don't want that, and that's a quality of the fragmented worldview. Anyway, okay, that's just a kind of a general overview of these things. Just some kind of scattered loose thoughts there. This is all an extension from The Fabric of Reality. This is the best book ever written, at least one of them. And that's just in the first chapter. So super cool stuff. Very interesting. I've not heard anybody talk about this specific aspect of the book, so that's why I'm thinking about it and talking about it here. I'd love to hear more about what you think. If you have read the book and you have a sense of David Deutsch's ideas already, love to hear more about what you think about what I just said. And if you haven't read the book, I'd love to get your sense of what I'm talking about just from how I presented it and what I said about it. You might have just a totally different perspective on how I'm seeing it. So I'd love to hear that too. Thanks for being here.